Namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our full moon, which is coming this Wednesday, October 20th. Um, we're going to have the moon full in the sign of Aries, in sidereal Aries, and the sun has just moved into sidereal Libra. And so what we're really seeing here is the polarity between self and others. The sun is actually debilitated in the sign of Libra because the sun is our power. It's our leadership. It's our authority. It's our connection to source, our connection to consciousness. And we don't want that to come from others, right? We want that to come from ourselves. We want that to come from our own power, our own authority, our own connection to source. We're, when we compromise on these things, then we're led astray. And so we see that the sun is weak in this sign of Libra for that reason, because we care more about what someone else's opinion is than our own, or our own capacity to lead ourselves, or to hold our power. And so this will come up in our own lives, in our own sense of power. It'll come up relative to whatever house Leo is for you, whatever the sun is ruling. And it's also going to come up in regards to our government, because the sun is government. And so wherever you live and whatever powers may, enforce their rules and their laws upon you, you will see that also happening. There'll be less of a strength coming from the government, less of a strength coming from those in power, more of a need to compromise, because they won't feel secure in that power. And so that's a lot of what Libra brings up, is a lack of security in self and a need to accommodate others. And while that's awesome with Venus, the planet of our relationships, or with Mercury, where we're using our communication, it doesn't work as well with especially the masculine signs. The masculine planets, or grahas, of Mars, Sun, and Jupiter. And it's particularly debilitating when it's the sun. So this, this moon is a reflection of what we need to see opposite of where the sun is, right? The full moon is that counterpoint, that place where we look and say, hey, maybe we're doing this too much. We need to do this. But in this case, it's very early degrees. It's 316 degrees into Libra. The sun has just moved into Libra in the sidereal zodiac. And so we haven't really had tenure there. We haven't really had time there. The sun's actually been in Virgo. So we haven't been over compromising yet, is my point. But yet we're still seeing this reflection of what does individuality look like? In Aries, we're self-started, we're self-motivated, we're doing what we want to do. We have blinders on to how that affects others. We don't care as much, actually. We're very self-centric or selfish in our actions. And we have a tendency in our society to think of selfishness as bad. But the truth is, it's all relative to what's there, right? Different aspects of ourselves do better in different places. The sun is exalted in Aries. We do want to have that self-centric, selfish motivation when we're working with the sun. Mars is in his own sign in Aries. That's also very effective for discipline, courage, and the ability to act from a self-motivated place. But the moon is different. The moon is where we connect. The moon is where we're unconditionally loving and where we want to meet others, without edges, with roundness, with welcoming qualities. And Aries is where we cut people off because we're on our own path and we're doing our own thing. So it's not necessarily the best placement for the moon, although it's not debilitated as it is with the sun, but it is a place where emotionally we're going to feel the neglect of our own power. The fact that we have been compromising, or that we are about to start compromising, I guess is a better way of putting it, that we just began this path of compromising on our power, is going to light up in us, in our mind, in our heart, in our emotions, in our psyche, that our individuality also matters, and that we shouldn't compromise too much, and that we need to be cognizant of how much we allow others' opinions to guide us, and how much we allow our need for harmony and peace to sway our choices and our actions. So this is an important theme for us right now: self versus others, and what is too much compromise, and where are we compromising, and is it connective to compromise on something as important as your values, on your not your values, but your higher sense that guides everything else. If we think of the sun as like our God principle, our consciousness, and then the moon is our mind and our emotions, and then each of the planets dictates a different part of us. Mars is our sense of action, discipline, courage. Venus is our relational self, our sense of happiness and pleasure. Mercury is our communication. Saturn's our commitments, and Jupiter's our beliefs, our ideals, and what inspires us. So each of those parts need to come from a really solid connection to source. When sun is weak, everything else sort of filters from that weakness. The founding thing that's directing us, the God that's coming through us, that's giving us the direction and the leadership for all the other parts of us, is starting off on a faulty front. So it's something to really reflect upon, the ways in which we do choose to compromise, and are they the right ways to compromise? And in other ways, maybe we're not compromising, that do make more sense. Like in a conversation, it makes a lot of sense to compromise, because, there's only so much to argue. If somebody either sees things from your perspective or doesn't, really the most important way to communicate is to say what your feelings and needs are and what you're trying to get out of something. Or if it's factual communication that needs to take place, then just the details, just the data, as we see with Mercury in Virgo right now. So I'm going to flash to the screen in a minute where I show you the chart, so you can actually see these things I'm talking about. But I wanted to first mention the nakshatra that this particular full moon is in, and also the Hindu celebration around this full moon is called Sharad Purnima, and it's the full moon that comes right after Navaratri. So we've just finished the 9 nights of the goddess mother and in Vijaya Dasami and the victory day. And now we're moving into this full moon, and it's said to be the full moon of Lakshmi. And Lakshmi is the goddess of blessings, of fertility, of abundance, of generosity, and of relational happiness, right? She represents Venus and the love that we can emanate for others. And her function or story around this full moon is that she comes down to earth and she blesses all of her devotees who stay awake. So people will stay awake and light a candle and offer to their altar for her. And she comes by and bestows her blessings of this really grace of spirit. With Lakshmi, more than anybody, I think of people kind of going the greedy route, and like, I want money and I want love and I want a baby maybe, or whatever we want, which is not greedy necessarily, but is still something that we're wanting for ourselves. But the truth of Lakshmi, the higher essence of Lakshmi, is spiritual grace and the capacity to learn that in giving we receive, that it is actually more about finding that place within ourselves where we can stay calm, we can stay cool, we can stay in our light, despite adversity, despite, all the different challenges we might face, and certainly in spite of argument, in spite of fight with someone. There's always the choice to dissolve it with loveliness, to dissolve it with kindness, to dissolve it with generosity or compassion. And we can fix ourselves on the idea of bringing more beauty, more pleasure, more love into our lives by giving more of that. And the more we're kind of greedy and taking and, how can we get stuff from people, the more we're not getting Lakshmi's blessings. We just won't receive them. We won't be of them. And so the more we can embody the beauty of generosity and spiritual generosity, right? Also this higher quality of devotion that is high love, where we are not so concerned with what we get back. which is one of the issues we see in the relational world, is one of the issues we see with Venus in general, is people having a strong need to get and wanting everything to be sort of contractual, like you give, I get. This is like, it's equal. It has to be fair. And in the higher blessings of Venus and the higher blessings of Lakshmi, we transcend that. And we no longer need the return on our investment of our love and our graciousness and our generosity and our kindness. We of course want to live in a world where we're honored, but we create that by creating that honor for ourselves, that love and respect for ourselves, knowing what boundaries to compromise on, knowing which ones not to, knowing not to compromise on our power or our truth or our higher connection to source, and yet understanding that in something simple like communication, compromise can go a really long way. Or in a relationship, willing to give a little in the more material world. So this is a very blessed full moon for us all to shine on the blessings of Lakshmi and to reflect on how we can give and be charitable without compromising. It's a difference. Our connection to that Libran quality of having the sun in Libra, it doesn't need to be giving away our power. It actually, we infuse ourselves with more power when we come from a state of grace, and when we're not trying to kind of punish people for ways they haven't, done right by us, or whatever our stories are in our head, which are plenty. And some of them will be moving forward faster than others. And I'm going to talk about all the different connections in this chart right now, and what we're seeing with the transits and the retrograde planets that are now going to be forward moving. Some of them already are, some of them are going there. But first, I just wanted to talk about this star, Ashwini. And Ashwini is the very first nakshatra. It's the very first star of the 27 nakshatras. And it is the it is the star that sort of sets us off on a new venture. It is where we are beginning something new. And it will be relative to the house that Aries is for you. So, if you're an Aries rising, then that is your first house, and it will have to do with your identity. If you're a Taurus rising, as I am, it's going to actually be your 12th house of sort of escape and the subconscious realms and the fantasy realms and the confusion and delusion that can come around that, as well as the higher principles of moksha and freedom and releasing ourselves from our attachments. But obviously that's more of a culminating house than a starting house. So it will reflect that for people who are Taurus, and each of the other signs will have that be a different house for them as well. And that's where you might find yourself beginning something new. But in Ashwini, we have the story of Sanjna, and she is consciousness, and the sun, Surya, is her husband. And Surya is getting a little hot for Sanjna. And we can all feel this right now because Mars has been combust really close to the sun for quite some time now, and still more time, like another month and a half. So we really have been feeling quite a bit of heat, right? It's that the heat is here. So she's feeling that. She's like, I love my husband, but man, he's hot, and not in a good way. He's too hot. I can't handle it. So she needs to take a break. And she enlists her sister, Chaya, which means shadow. And she brings her in and says, please take my place, but don't sleep with him, don't take my place that much. And her sister says, okay. She steps in, and Sanjna takes her vacation to the cooler parts of the universe. And while she's gone, of course, Chaya does actually sleep with her husband, and they have 2 children. And one of them is Saturn, our planet of time, our planet of fear, our planet of the stark cold reality of life. And the other one is Yama, the god of death. So these 2 children are now illegitimate children of the sun. Right. And you can see that playing out in other relationships between Saturn and the sun, especially this animosity they have towards one another. But Sanjana comes back, and she's like, obviously there's evidence that you didn't follow what I asked. There's 2 children here. So she gets very upset at her husband for not knowing that it wasn't her. And she turns herself into a mare, and she goes down to earth, and she's galloping across, the planet, and Surya follows her, and he turns himself into a stallion, and he also goes down to earth, and he meets her in a field, and the two make up and they make love, and they beget children, and the children they beget are the Ashwini twins, who are the horsemen, and they are physicians of the gods. They become the Ayurvedic physicians of the gods, and they bring medicine and this vast body of knowledge of the balancing of our bodies. That is Ayurveda, of how we heal by balancing our elementals. And so this, this is sort of the idea that we're starting off on a new venture, right? And we have to make choices based in our own best interest. Like Sanjana had to get away from the heat. It was too hot. And of course, there were consequences to that. Surya wanted his needs met. There was a woman there, looked kind of like his wife. It was good enough for him. There was consequences, but then there was consequences for him also, right? The consequences for him is that then now his wife is mad. And, all in all, though, by acting in their needs within their own higher self of where they were at, they then end up meeting and coming back together and creating these beautiful twins who offer healing to the gods. So there's this thing where we think we know what's going to happen as a result of choices we make. But when we're really aligned and we're coming from a state of higher connection to source, our choices are coming from that place, and it will unfold. Grace is there. Grace is flowing. And the more we can have faith about that, which I know is quite hard with our Jupiter situation right now, which I'll get into in a minute, the more we will just trust that. Just trust that what we're doing in each moment is the best we can do and is coming from our truth. When we're compromising, selling out on our own self to other people, then our choices don't come from that place. And then we end up, suffering again, suffering twice, once in our negating of our own highest self and consciousness, and then twice in the result of that, which will inevitably come. So there's a lot to be said for finding your connection and flowing with that. And of course, transits affect all of us. So what we see is the debilitation affects everybody because everybody's debilitated in this moment. But those who have higher qualities in their chart natally of those planets that are debilitated are going to see more of how it's running in the world and not feel as comfortable with that energy. Those who have energies that are a little closer to that, like if someone has their sun in Libra or their Jupiter in Capricorn, they're going to feel more comfortable with that, which is not really that great. They're going to be like, oh, this is great. Everybody feels really fearful. Awesome. That's good for me. Oh, compromising on myself. That's what I do. There's going to be kind of a comfort level there, and it's going to feel cleaner and easier to handle. But we will all be experiencing it on some level and experiencing it from others, right? Experiencing it from the other people around us. So I'm going to share my screen right now and go ahead and show this full moon in Aries. It's on the 20th and it's at 4:57 a.m. in Hawaii. So we're minus 10 GMT. We're one of the last people to get anything coming our way. And so, you can see this moon and the sun in this axis of this where we are. And what we also see is that Mars is really close to the sun still, right? It's still in Virgo, but it's like 29 degrees, 3 degrees here. We're very close. And Mars is still very combust and very much about to move into Libra. So I did a report a little bit ago, and it's still sending out. It's a free report if you sign up for my newsletter, where you find out what Mars combust for all 12 rising signs looks like. So if you have, a Virgo rising, Mars has been on your rising sign. It's going to move into your second house. For each of the rising signs, I lay it out. And it can be very helpful to understand where this combustion, this fiery energy is, because all the planets, when they're close to the sun, are called combust. And what it means is that there's like a short fuse of the rays of the sun. Same like Sanjana, who's like, these rays are a bit hot. I'm too close to you. I need to get some distance. Well, the planets also like to have some distance from the sun. And when they are really close, they feel that heat and they have a short fuse. Well, with Venus or Mercury, there might be a different way that they express that short fuse, right? Mercury might make a joke or something, or be kind of, putting off the fact that it doesn't feel heard, that we don't feel listened to, something like that. But with Mars, it's already the hot fuse, right? Mars is our anger. It is our expression of our passionate self that's like either disciplined and courageous or angry and fiery. And so the short fuse with Mars is quite long. There's the widest berth, the widest amount of degrees that makes Mars combust. And that fiery energy is very strong and we can feel it. So that's one thing to really be aware of. It is moving out of Virgo. So hopefully it's moving out of the land of our health, but it is moving into the relational world, right? So a combust Mars with the debilitated sun in Libra is going to feel hot, and it's going to feel, hot within relations with others. And what it really looks like is compromising, and then getting really mad at someone else for your compromises and for your lack of discipline and for your lack of capacity to really show up for yourself. And both Mars and the sun are where we're showing up for ourselves. And that makes us better at relationship. The more disciplined you are, the more you do that yoga practice or take that morning run or do your surf session or whatever it is you do, the more you are ready and available to meet other people because your needs have been met. If your needs aren't getting met, you're going to be a basket case, and that's going to show. And it's going to come out in anger. It's going to come out in flashes of anger. So Mars, sun combust in Libra is problematic for sure. One blessing we have here is that Mercury will now be forward moving. So by the time of this full moon, when I'm filming this, this is not the case yet. Jupiter and Mercury are still retrograde, but Jupiter is a couple days away from being forward moving, and Mercury is one extra day from that. So we are close. And by the time of this full moon, all the planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury will all be direct again, which is, another thing I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But Mercury is now going to be direct in his own sign of Virgo. And not only is it his own sign, but Mercury is the one planet that's exalted in his own sign. So it's in the highest state. And the reason is because our communication is clear. What we're doing is organized and we have somewhere to put it. Our information has a place to go, and we're able to use our discernment through that categorical process, through that process of organization, where we are able to discern, truth and not truth, and we're able to clearly communicate things. So Mercury in positive dignity. And then even when he moves into Libra is another positive dignity for Mercury. It's very, like I was saying, when I was talking about what planets do well in Libra, it brings harmonious communication. So that's one plus. Our communication will be still grounded and focused and clear. The other plus is that Venus and Mars will be in, and I can, set this up so that we can actually see it. Venus and Mars will be in exchange of signs. So we'll see, this is the 22nd. We'll see Mars and Venus in each other's signs helps quite a bit. Venus is in Scorpio, Mars is in Libra, and they offer each other some help. Mars offers some courage to Venus because Venus is sort of riding the tumultuous Scorpio plane where relationships are like controlling and emotional and everything's kind of, blowing up our fears. And also, Venus has joined Ketu here. So that's also problematic. Ketu is where we are, without a head, without an engagement, and where we are quite blind and unwilling to really do the work. So with our relational planet, that's problematic because we might have our head sort of out of our relationships in a way, some blind spots coming up. And with the emotional torrent of Scorpio, it's like a back and forth between being sort of really into it and wanting to control every aspect of it and feeling all the emotions to being kind of like disengaged and not really caring. And this sort of, erratic or sudden cutoff. So that's problematic, but you can see Venus has moved past Ketu quite a bit. So they were in exact degrees when the moon was actually there in her state of debilitation, soon after that new moon that led us into Navaratri that 2 weeks ago. So that was in exact degrees at that point, and now Venus has passed it. So the energy isn't quite as tight. And then we have this exchange of signs where Mars has also got a problem, right? He's joined the sun, he's combust. But their exchange does help each other. Venus offers a little bit of, sweetness to Mars. Maybe you can, try to not be so intense when you explode on someone else for your lack of discipline, and bringing in each other's strengths to gift one another is what happens in those exchange of signs. So that's a positive thing. And, I'm just going to keep it here right now because the moon is still even in Aries. And we'll see that we have, the other thing is these forward moving planets. I discussed Mercury already, but we have Jupiter and Saturn now forward moving also. And Saturn is in his own sign. So, we've been feeling a real buildup with these energies because Jupiter and Saturn are retrograde for very long periods of time. Saturn won't retrograde in May, Jupiter in June. And this is apparent retrograde motion. It means the planet has slowed down. So it appears to be retrograde, appears to be going backwards from our perspective here on Earth. It doesn't actually go backwards, but it builds up and builds up within us, this energy. And with Saturn, it's our fear. It's our sense of time. There's only so much time. We have to do these amount of things. And as a result of that fear and that time, we humble ourselves in service of something. We roll up our sleeves and we do something and we commit to something. So that's the positive side of Saturn. Especially in Capricorn, we are committing to, survival. It's a survival sign, but we're also committing to the reality. We're committing to this cold, harsh reality of life. And the cold, harsh reality of life is death. It's where we accept that we will die and that we will get old and we will get crickety. And we will, and that isn't where it's at, that our detachment from all of it, including our own body, is really the key. And that capacity to be alone, that capacity to sit with that which is uncomfortable, unfun, and really depressing is where Saturn's magic is. And it helps us to be the great meditator. It helps us to find that part of us that can go inside and release all these different aspects of ourself that are holding us in attachment. Now, Jupiter here is in debility, which I already alluded to earlier. Jupiter is not good in Capricorn. And the reason is because Capricorn is where we are in this sort of stark, cold reality of survival. And Jupiter is where we're trying to be expansive and have beliefs and ideals. And we have to back up and look at the big picture and find real truth, not this sort of cold, contractual, there's only these two choices and we're going to die, this kind of higher truth, this sense of truth that can really bring us closer to love, not fear. That's why Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, where it's unconditional love that we're coming from, as opposed to the sort of contractual, contracted, sort of fear-based place of Jupiter, where we're not as inspired. But Saturn being joined Jupiter does help. It's what we call Nicha Bhanga, when there is a planetary help. And in this case, Saturn does help because it brings out those cold, hard realities. Perhaps it brings meditation or a capacity to be alone, things like this that will help our bad judgment, our bad principles, where our ideals and what we're founding ourselves on and our path on is fear and lack, and a sense of time, when in fact truth is generally quite timeless. So Saturn does help, but what I see is that in people's natal charts, when they have a debilitated planet, they spend their lives sort of working on that because they have to. The debility is so rough that they have to do things to kind of mitigate that. And by the time you get to a certain age, there's some awareness around that, especially if there's Nicha Bhanga, right? Especially if there's a mitigating factor present. But in transits, we don't have that same time. Now, Jupiter and Saturn do move for long periods of time. Jupiter first entered Capricorn in November of 2020, and then went out in April into Aquarius, and then retrograded back in, just recently in September. He just made his way back into Capricorn. And now it's forward moving in Capricorn again. When a planet is in debility, it's actually quite better if it's retrograde, because then we slow down. We're like, okay, maybe our ideas aren't that good. Maybe, maybe there's some problems here. Maybe we need to rethink this. We take our time with it. Forward moving debilitated planet is a much bigger problem. But even with this, this Nicha Bhanga, when it's a transit, everyone's experiencing it, right? There's not like other people who are feeling more uplifted that are kind of reflecting on our fear. Everyone's sort of in this fear fest. And also we don't have the time to work on it. We don't have as much time, although Jupiter does transit for a year, and you get, more time than you would with Venus or Mercury. It's still not enough time really to master that thing. So what we see is that people will be at their comfort level again. People who have that debilitated Jupiter, have a Jupiter that's in a low, maybe Virgo or somewhere else that's kind of contracted and not as expansive, will feel more comfortable. And people who have perhaps Jupiter in Pisces or Sagittarius or Cancer or somewhere are going to really see the reflection of this fear. But at the same time, they're still going to be feeling more fear than they usually do, regardless of the status of their natal Jupiter. So that's one of the issues with transits, is we all experience it. The person across from you can't like light you up with some wisdom, right? Because they're also in their own little fear box. So that's a really important thing to understand, the difference between a transit and a natal placement, just in general, but in this particular case. So we will be seeing that the next month, and Jupiter will go out again back into Aquarius November 19th, I believe, this year, maybe November 20th. I might have mixed up my 2020, my 2021, but he will be going back into Aquarius, and we will see some freeing of that fear, although Aquarius isn't necessarily less fearful in the sense that Saturn still rules it, but it is there's the quality of air and rationality and a capacity to think our way through things and to create, use Jupiter's energy there to really fight for social justice and things like that. So there's a lot more promise and a lot less of that contraction than we see when Jupiter's in Capricorn. In Capricorn, there's also, it's an earth sign. So there's arta, there's wealth, there's material quality. So this sort of stingy quality of Jupiter in Capricorn comes out as well. But it can be good for saving money. There's always a blessing. There's always something to find in it. But it is important to note that at this point, we will have debilitated Jupiter, debilitated Sun, and combust Mars. So our three masculine planets are not in good shape. Right. And then the moon, the moon moves. So it's just for this full moon that it's in Aries, but the moon is in Mars's sign of Aries and Venus is in Mars's other sign of Scorpio. And neither of them are actually necessarily in good dignity either. So it's really Mercury and Saturn that we have right now. Communication and commitment. That's what we have. Our humility and our capacity to communicate is really what we have serving us right now. And when masculine energy particularly is in this bad of shape, we have to be aware that part of us that leads, that is action oriented, that does have discipline and courage, and that has beliefs that guide us and inspire us, is not doing well. So we're over compromising perhaps, or, like I said, the moon and Venus aren't in particularly great dignity either. So there's this quality of our masculine and feminine, and considering we're traversing this Aries Libra axis, where we have to look at ourselves versus others, we can imagine our relationships are going to take a hit without the strong masculine principle to keep us in our own rightness and in our own strength, and then without that, without the feminine planets really, being kind of a little bit tumultuous and feisty as well, will also be a problem. So it's something to really, tune into, be aware of, and really allow this Sharad Purnima, this time of Lakshmi blessings, to bless us with grace, bless us with grace in this, bless us with generosity. Note when we are acting in ways that might not be in our highest self. And when we're feeling, with Venus, this sort of jealousy or this controlling quality, or this sort of emotional like manipulation thing that can happen when Venus is in Scorpio, or when we're trying to fight with people because Mars is in Libra, or we're giving away our power, or we're acting from a place of fear, and our beliefs are really aligned with fear more than something higher, to really pull in that perspective that Mercury and Saturn give, because Mercury and Saturn are our neutral gender planets. Those are the planets that are not as much gendered. Mercury is like youthfulness, like a child, and Saturn is like old people. And there's a quality where our gender starts to dissipate there. And I know, there's a lot of conversations that could be had about gender. I'm not engaging in them right now. I'm speaking from a planetary perspective, so not a man or a woman on Earth, but these sort of planetary energies and how they affect us. We all have the masculine planets, we all have the feminine planets, and we all need a strong sun. We all, or want a strong sun. We all want a strong moon. We all want those things regardless of what our gender is. But these Saturn and Mercury have a more neutral quality to them. They're not as engaged in that, in that masculine and feminine. And they're also just kind of more neutral in general. Saturn's where we have that cold, kind of placid, like reality thing that we're doing. And Mercury's where we're communicating. So them being in their own signs is that neutrality is where we need to come back to, right? That sense of neutrality. And so I I hope that we can do that. I'm just going to move this back for final view so we can see where we are for the full moon again. I hope that in our, this part of us that's dealing with this relational thing of the moon and the sun and compromise in Aries and Libra, that we can come to that dispassion and that level place where we're not acting from all of our other things that are feeling out of sorts and blaming people for things that are actually our own faults. And that we can take responsibility in that and really use our buddhi, our discrimination, our intellect to discern when we are doing that, and to really use that part of Saturn that just allows us to maybe sit and meditate or take a moment, find some aloneness, and really allow truth to arise from that field instead. So I hope this is helpful for you. I feel very blessed to share. And again, if you are not already on my email list and you want to sign up, you will get not just the Mars combust for all 12 signs, but I'm also doing 2 other reports that are sending out right now. Jupiter back in Capricorn. So it was actually written when Jupiter originally went to Capricorn, but it's the same houses. So it's showing what houses Jupiter rules for you and what house Capricorn is for you. That's what's important to know. What areas of your life are being affected and in what area of your life is that happening? And then also for the nodes for Rahu and Ketu. And we are coming into our final eclipse season with these nodes in this axis. So, end of November into December 4th is our solar eclipse in Scorpio. So it's really important to know where the nodes are for you as well. So all 3 of those will be sent your way as soon as you sign up for my email list. And it's at www.radha, RADHA, home, HOME, yoga, YOGA.com. Have a blessed Sharad Purnima.